to examine two election authorities in McLean County is underway. The director of the Bloomington Election Commission says he would support consolidation of the two. The McLean County League of Women Voters is again studying the functions of the Bloomington Election Commission and the McLean County Clerk. The league conducted a similar study in 2008, recommending the agencies consolidate. However, no action was taken. Consolidation would look like consolidating the two or the creation of a bipartisan election commission to administer all county elections. The executive director of the Bloomington Election Commission says he would be in favor of consolidating.
The main benefit I see is that when you're an election professional, we only deal with the elections. So we have more time to double check, we have more time to do everything else because we're not worrying about all of the other duties that a clerk may have.
He also says having an appointed bipartisan official rather than an elected official running the agency would provide more stability and consistency. Right now, Bloomington has 54,000 registered voters. McLean County has 64,000.